Alright guys, welcome back to another video. In today's one, I want to talk about Reynatis because, yeah, I've been playing it over the past couple of days. I've got about 8 hours in the game so far. It did release in Japan last week, so what I'm playing is the Japanese version, which means that everything is in Japanese, so it's a bit of a hard experience, but I still get the basics of the game, which is great. The localized version doesn't release in all other regions until September, October. I will be giving my full thoughts towards Reynatis when I finish the game, so hopefully that shouldn't take too much longer. But for this video, I wanted to talk about the World Ends With You content that is in this game, one of the most exciting aspects. What originally started off as an April Fool's joke actually turned out to be a fully fledged piece of content that is in the main game of Reynatis and not downloadable content. That's right, Square Enix literally have a part to play in Reynatis. Now, while the TWEWY content is still developed by the Reynatis developer, Natsume Atari, the narrative of the TWEWY content was written by the Reynatis director, Takumi Isobe. However, Isobe got the Neo TWEWY director, Hiroyuki Ito, as well as the scenario writer, Akiko Ishibashi, and even the producer, Tomohiko Hirano, and Tetsuya Nomura, to oversee the narrative of this inclusion. So yes, it's a very real piece of TWEWY content. Now, I cannot tell you the specifics of what happens in this story segment, just because everything's in Japanese. I've got no idea what's going on. There is something really interesting that does happen at the end that I will go over, but aside from that, I plan on revisiting this when the localized version releases in a few months' time. You can access the TWEWY content in Reynatis when you're up to chapter 20. This is about halfway through the game, which took me about 6 hours to get to. In the church hideout, you can activate the quest by interacting with this golden light. Here it will tell you that you're about to start the collaboration content, which recommends that you're level 45 to play through. I was actually level 41 and had no trouble at all. It starts off by Myron finding a Reaper's pin. What's interesting about this pin is it's an alternate inverted color of Rindo's Reaper pin that we see in Neo TWEWY. We then get an episode screen, which is the usual thing that happens throughout both of the TWEWY games, and this content is known as Yet Another Day. Another Day is an alternate secret episode when you've finished out both Neo TWEWY and TWEWY 1. It's an additional episode that basically takes place in an alternate universe. So the things that happen in Another Day aren't actually part of the main timeline of both of the games. So with seeing the inverted Reaper's pin, along with the fact that this is Another Day, means that this is an alternate universe, and that the Neo TWEWY characters that will come across in this content aren't the same versions of those characters from Neo TWEWY. After Myron acquires the Reaper's pin, himself and Moa are transported to a different Shibuya. He notices that the 109 building is now mysteriously the 104 building. This is how it appears in TWEWY's rendition of Shibuya. We'll also notice now that all of the billboards throughout Shibuya are displaying the brands that are shown in The World Ends With You. So this version of Shibuya, for the most part, is Reynatis' rendition, just with some TWEWY flavors infused throughout. We make our way towards the 104 building, and suddenly some noise appear. This is obviously very different for Myron, as he's never seen creatures like this before. We're pitted against the Decadraven and Mosh Grizzly noise. Now, the disappointing thing here is these are the only two noise that appear throughout this content that you'll fight. There is a wide repertoire of different noise creatures, and it's honestly a little bit disappointing that there wasn't at least a few more noise creatures that appeared throughout this content. You literally only verse these two. Myron and Moa split up to investigate further into what is going on. This is clearly not their Shibuya. We play as Moa solo for a little bit and eventually come across Rindo.
Hey yo, that is my boy! That is my son! Look at him! He is glistening! He is glowing! He must be protected at all costs! I thought I'd never see him again! Here he is!
Such a Kingdom Hearts moment for sure, having two characters from two entirely separate universes coming together here. It sent me back to Dream Drop Distance when Sora first came across Neku in Traverse Town. Sort of a similar situation going on here. Here you'll investigate the alley with Rindo explaining to Moa what these new mysterious billboards are, explaining the various different brands that are appearing. You fight a few waves of noise here, and then eventually we come back to Myron, who comes across Shoka. We have to fight a few more waves of noise as Myron, and Shoka then helps us investigate the scramble crossing, notably the Hachiko statue, which here in Reynatis' rendition of Shibuya is actually a crow rather than Hachiko. After we finish that, all 4 of the characters meet up. I wish I knew what the gang were talking about. I'm assuming it's probably got something to do with where are we and what is happening. Both Shoka and Moa end up taking a selfie, which shows us a totally new piece of artwork created by TWEWY character art designer Gen Kobayashi. After the conversation's wrapped up, we leave the scramble crossing and we get a classic TWEWY results screen, but in a Reynatis style, showing us the artwork of Myron. I'm unsure if the results actually matter here, but I did end up getting the highest rank. The gang then find themselves on a very familiar looking rooftop, and okay, that is Mr. Mew. Wait a minute, this entire situation looks incredibly familiar. Is this the Mr. Mew boss fight from Neo The World Ends With You? It is! So the boss of this content is Mr. Mew, but to a point where it's almost a one-to-one of the exact same fight from Neo TWEWY. Now here's the thing, both Reynatis and Neo TWEWY were developed on the Unity engine, and it was explained in a Famitsu interview that Square Enix had supplied Natsumi Atare, the Reynatis developers, with Neo TWEWY assets. The models that we see of Rindo, Shoka, the noise, the literal Mr. Mew boss stage, and Mr. Mew himself are the actual models ripped from Neo TWEWY. They look a little bit different here because they are missing the thick black outlines, a part of Neo TWEWY's art style, but these are the exact same models. And yeah, it does look a little bit funny to see the characters of Rindo and Shoka and even the noise in a more realistic version of Shibuya outside of their own. But then it's funny to see Myron and Moa standing in a more cartoonier version of Shibuya from TWEWY here on the rooftop when we're fighting the boss. It's a little bit jarring, but then again, this version of Shibuya is like a crossover of both Reynatis' and Neo's kind of coming together, hence why for the most part this Shibuya is Reynatis', just with all of the different TWEWY brands plastered throughout. But then this rooftop, for some odd, almost jarring reason, is TWEWY's version of Shibuya? Something weird is definitely going on here, and I do have a feeling they probably explain what is actually happening within the context of the narrative that's being spoken about here. Unfortunately though, I can't read any of it. The boss fight is pretty easy. So long as you're attacking the main Mr. Mew, you'll deal damage to the boss, kill him, and it's over. The last cutscene though is very interesting and may actually confirm something to us. What most of us were curious to know is this content here actually canon to The World Ends With You? Now we know that this is another day episode, so it means it's taking place in an alternate universe. Well, Sho appears right at the end, and we know that Sho is able to travel between parallel alternate universes. The Sho that's in Neo TWEWY's Another Day episode is the same Sho from the main narrative of Neo, which means this is the same Sho appearing in Reynatis' version. So while we've got a different Rindo and Shoka here, separate to Neo's story, this is the exact same Sho, telling us that Reynatis' Shibuya here, crossing over with a bit of that Neo TWEWY flavor, is a parallel universe to the universe of TWEWY. Who knows if they actually plan on doing any more with this? Like, let's say if we do get a Reynatis 2, if they'll further expand upon the connection here between Reynatis and TWEWY. They easily could have not have included this scene, but the fact that they included the scene here with Sho does confirm to us that there is some connection to Reynatis and TWEWY. Through a translation, I managed to figure out that Sho is talking about how it's possible for noise to appear in parallel worlds. And he's gone over his math mumbo jumbo like he usually does, but he's talking about how there's no solution he can't figure out. Basically meaning he's gonna figure out how the noise are also able to travel to parallel worlds. God, this so makes me think that the noise will somehow end up in Kingdom Hearts. I really hope so. Oh yeah, and for some reason, they just didn't use the character model of Sho and rather just used a PNG art render of his character standing behind the fence. I don't know if you had to pay like some additional money to get the character model of Sho, but they just decided to go for the PNG cutout. It's kind of funny. After defeating Mew, both Moa and Marin return to their version of Shibuya. As a reward, we also get a Mr. Mew graffiti ability, which allows us to use a Mr. Mew attack, which is just hilarious and ridiculously stupid to use. It's actually pretty good, though as you make your way through the game, you'll eventually unlock higher tiers of your other graffiti spells, making this a little bit obsolete, but it's super fun to use, and it's actually kind of great for a stun lock. And that's the content. So yeah, it's quite small. It is very, very light. I was expecting this to be perhaps maybe a little bit longer. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes to complete, so this literally is just a side quest and not some big extra additional story scenario. Maybe I was expecting too much, but I was expecting this to be like the full Reapers game with all 7 days and you're coming across Reapers and maybe a few more of the Neo TWEWY characters, but it's literally just Shoka, Rindo, Mr. Mew, and 2 noise. There's a handful of battles and only 2 areas that you get to explore. It's not really even exploring. They're the same areas you get to explore anyway in Reynatis' main scenario, so there's not really too much to it. I have to say though, just the simple fact that this exists is amazing. Tetsuya Nomura recently mentioned that he thought he would never end up seeing the Neo TWEWY characters again, and the fact that Reynatis has been able to breathe another chance of life into these characters for them to appear again is really amazing. By the way, this comment doesn't rule out the possibility of a 3rd game. I know that many of us are thinking that because Neo TWEWY didn't perform that well in sales, that Square Enix probably won't end up ever making another one. As we saw with Neo, it revolves around a new group of characters separate to that of the ones that appeared in the first game. Yes, those characters from the first game, Neku, Beat, Joshua, they all do appear in Neo, but the focus is on a new group. I would say it would be the same if a 3rd one were to ever be developed. Even though this is a really light piece of content, it's something that didn't need to exist, and the simple fact that it does is so amazing. It's a crossover that makes a lot of sense, because trust me, when you play Reynatis for yourself, and if you have played Neo TWEWY, it's a very TWEWY feeling game. There's a lot of, I feel like, TWEWY influence infused into Reynatis. Of course, along with both Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. It's a fun little piece of additional content, and I'm looking forward to dipping back into it when the English version arrives. However guys, that's all for today. Remember, my thoughts on Reynatis as a whole will be out very soon, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything that's going on here. Check out my other garbage social media platforms, links below. Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons. I hope each and every one of you are having a fantastic day, and we'll talk real soon.